Target released their second quarter earnings this week, and they weren't good. In fact, the CEO himself points to backlash against their Pride Month displays. You remember the ones with the easy to tuck girls' bathing suits, and remember they were right there in the front door as you walked into Target. I remember the backlash began, and the CEO said, "Oh, well, we're going to move those displays to the back, in the southern states, because you know how those people are." Well, it appears that the Target boycott by conservatives have really left a mark, similar to the boycott against Bud Light. Is this a lesson for corporations? And is it a lesson for conservatives that boycotts actually work? And if so, is that even a good lesson? Carol Roth joins us. She's the author of a brand new book, You Will Own Nothing, Your War with a New Financial World Order and How to Fight Back. I'm sorry, I got caught up because I love that cover. It's such a great cover. Carol, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Larry. Yes, the designer of the cover just knocked it out of the park. And if you really want to portray a concept visually, he did a fabulous job. So I was very pleased with that.
And I want to get into the details of this because I think it's incredibly important, if not incredibly depressing. But at least you do give tools on how to push back about what's going on here. But about this boycott, listen, I don't like what Target did. I don't like what Bud Light did. And God knows the left has been boycotting conservatives, conservative media, conservative. I remember how they went after Chick-fil-A. They tried to
Yeah.
do that with In-N-Out Burger. They can be effective. Is it a good lesson to learn?
So it's interesting because I'm sort of in the middle. I'm an individualist. I let people do whatever it is that they want. And I'm not a huge fan of most boycotts in general. But leaving whatever side of the specific issue you are on aside, it really doesn't make sense for businesses to be wading into politics and culture wars unless it's consistent with their brand. If you think of a brand like Patagonia that has stood for the environment, or if you're selling, particularly to niche customers that have to do with a specific issue, that's very authentic to your brand and it makes a lot of sense. The issue comes when you get these corporations who sort of decide to wander into whatever the hot topic is of the day. And I understand why they're doing it. They're feeling a lot of pressure via something called ESG, environmental, social, and governmental issues that are being pushed not only by the global elite, by a lot of the capital providers. So management feels like they are taking a risk not by wading into these things, but by putting their jobs at risk by not wading into these things. But it's not good for the customers. It's not good for the shareholders. It's frankly not a good discussion for America. And so businesses should mind their own business.
Yeah, well said. And let's face it, some boycotts are easier than others. Like easiest thing in the world is to boycott Bud Light because even if you do like that kind of beer, when you're standing at the grocery store, there are literally seven other beers that taste exactly the same, same calories, just a different can. So that's easy to do. Target, I guess, the same thing. You can go to Walmart or Kohl's or just buy online. But like Disney, people wanted to boycott Disney, and I get it, and their heart's in the right place, I suppose. But Disney's really hard to boycott. What do you replace it with?
You don't, and that's why I've had so many people say, "Oh, I'm on vacation at Disney. Don't tell anyone." It's like, come
Right,
on, Disney, Disney's
exactly.
great. We all love Disney, and you don't have to boycott things to get your opinion across. You can write a letter. You can express your discontent without completely shutting something out of your life as well. I think that it's important that companies do hear from you, and if you feel like they're wading into a place that maybe they shouldn't, that's an important thing to let them know. But we're adults, so there's a way to do that without going completely the nuclear option and saying nobody can ever touch this for the rest of their lives. So again, I understand why some people may feel the need to do this on either side, but it would be nice to get back to a discourse where we can just express our opinions and let companies understand what the issues are and perhaps ask them to stay focused on their customer experience and on their employees and on the things that matter.
Well, and as a child of the '80s, I'm a little older than you, Carol. It was sort of influenced by Reaganomics and Morton Friedman and Jack Welch at GE. I've always felt that a company and their CEO, they have one obligation, and that's to their shareholders to make sure they sell their product, make money, and keep the stock rising. In this case, though, Anheuser-Busch and Disney and Target, they violated that, and that could be the Achilles heel here. when you take your eye off the prize and you prioritize other things and your stock goes down, now you've got to answer to the investors and they should feel some pain.
Yeah, it's funny that you don't think that I'm a child of the 80s with my big hair that I have brought to you here today, where I'm rechanneling that my favorite era. But you're absolutely right. And I think that's where this ESG notion comes in. It's considered business social credit, and it's bullying these businesses using capital, most of the time, our own capital, the capital of pensioners and retirement plans, to push companies to follow agendas that are political and social in nature that have nothing to do with their business. And the entire concept of a quote unquote stakeholder, which I do talk about in my book, which came from Klaus Schwab, who started the World Economic Forum, and he's been pushing this since 1971, more than 50 years. So he's been very persistent, is saying something very different than a shareholder. As you said, Larry, if you're a shareholder, you are taking a risk. If you are an employee with options, you are taking a risk. You're putting your blood, sweat, and tears into the business, and you have an actual stake. You have skin in the game. These pretend stakeholders have taken no risk. They have no skin in the game, and so they should have no say at the table. So I think that's a really important concept that we need to keep pushing on. If you don't actually have a stake and you haven't taken risk and you have no skin in the game, you are not a stakeholder. And you can make up words all you want, but the reality is that the businesses should not be catering to that and these pretend scores and this business social credit. They should be catering to their shareholders, to their customers, and to their employees.
Imagine that. By the way, I did notice the hair, of course, and it's always been a dream to interview Chrissy Hind. I'm a big fan of the Pretenders, so thank you again for
Fabulous.
being with us. Let's talk about the book. You Will Own Nothing. Let's show the cover again because it is stark, and I think it really does send a message. This is really geared toward what younger millennials, Generation Z. This is what they're hearing right now from our culture and our society, and you're supposed to like it. This really is Eastern European stuff going back to the Cold War.
Yeah, it's very interesting. When I first heard that meme, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, and heard that it came out of a group that was associated with the business and political elite, I thought they got it wrong because I was like, there's no way that business people are predicting the end of private property by 2030. It took very little research to find the video where, sure enough, it's the number one prediction. And I think you hit the nail on the head. The language itself tells us so much. The first piece of it is you'll own nothing. It's not will own nothing. The elite who
Yes,
are predicting this somehow don't think that
great
they're the ones that are
observation.
not going to have anything, any assets. And then you'll be happy. It's like a psyop to say that if you give up your property rights, if you don't have ownership, that thing that helps you to create wealth and also secures your freedom, that somehow that's going to be great for you, that you get to live this carefree YOLO life. And we know throughout history, through all the different isms, socialism, communism, fascism, whatnot, the people who didn't have property, they were not free, they were not happy, they were not wealthy. Many of them starved and lost their lives. So the idea that you're pushing on this so that people accept this outcome and believe in this outcome instead of having to force it upon them is certainly great for those who want to hoard the wealth and hoard the power. But it is really bad for the American dream and for the outcome of Americans and prosperity.
Are they listening though, especially the generation just getting out of college now who think Greta Thunberg has a point? I mean, if you don't own it, that means you're dependent on someone. And if you are dependent on some other entity, it's the opposite of independence. And when I was that age, all I wanted was independence.
True, but I also think as a young person, and perhaps you were more sophisticated as a child of the 80s, following Alex P. Keaton and being a little ahead of the curve. But most of
Okay.
us were idiots, and we had sort of these ideals and thought everything was great. And of course, the government was good and going to provide for us. And it wasn't until we did kind of get some independence and stand on our own 2 feet that we felt differently. I feel like these younger generations, they've been saddled with college debt from government predatory lending that has transferred wealth from them to colleges and administrators. They see the
Mm.
cost of housing that has exploded from cheap capital and undersupply, and Wall Street now coming in and competing with you for a house, and they feel
Yeah.
demoralized.
Carol Roth, buy her book, even if you have to buy it at Target. I appreciate you joining us, Carol Roth. We'll have you back next time. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight.